Welcome listeners to the SQM podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the housing affordability crisis within Australia, but specifically around the supply issue. Now, for those of you who have been paying attention to the news lately, the New South Wales Government has come out with some reforms around removing some of the red tape around basic developments and also the red tape around some of the major developments as well. So let's go through those quickly first, just to give you an idea of what we'll be discussing, and then we can move along to some questions for you, Louis, around what the impacts look like. So at the moment, if a major development is to happen, developers need to go through something like 22 different agencies in order to get the approval done. If you've got an approval that isn't a complying development, you can be waiting months and months and months for a full DA approval without any kind of shortcut or short way through. And then finally, if you're a complying development, depending on the council, it can take months to get even complying developments through. So what is a complying development? Complying development is any sort of development, small development like a 2-bedroom, 2-storey house, any kind of renovation, and any sort of dual occupancy or townhouse that has street requirements such as setbacks, how tall the house can be, where it's situated, and any sort of environmental conditions. Councils now have a 10-day window to knock back that requirement. If they don't take those 10 days, the application is automatically approved, which is a major change because it allows for those kind of simple developments to flow through more easily. They also have a plan for kind of those middle level developments. So anything that isn't a complying development, where they essentially plan to introduce a targeted assessment pathway. These are for developments where strategic planning and community consultation have already taken place around the property, and it doesn't require a full DA approval. So ideally, this would be a faster approval rate than 6 to 12 months with some councils. And then for major developments, the change is that they now have a development coordination agency that essentially goes out to all the different bodies. So you've got, your fire departments, your water departments, all those sort of things. You'll have one body that now controls that whole process. I think this is quite a big change, Louis, for a lot of these different development bodies, and for speeding up a lot of the red tape and the paperwork, allowing to get to development much more quickly. What are your thoughts around the impacts?
Yeah, housing affordability has been an issue in this country for many years, really since about the 1990s. It's been driven by two key factors. Firstly, supply side constraints, which hopefully these policy reforms in New South Wales will address some of the issues there, and overzealous demand, driven by very strong population growth. That is the reality of it. You have restricted supply plus ongoing surging demand. You're going to get higher housing prices. Higher housing prices impact upon affordability naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, as I mentioned before, that this policy is looking to sort of change is that supply issue. So essentially at the moment, if you're looking to do a new development or you're looking to do any kind of renovation, you're sort of having to go through a maze of bodies and that sort of thing to get approvals. Actually, interestingly, my next door neighbour's building a house at the moment, and it took him 12 months to get a DA approval for the build on his house. So the major differences at the moment, firstly, minor changes. So anything that what we would call a complying development. So that is a development that is in line with the setback, in line with the street requirements, in line with the environmental concerns. anything that ticks all those boxes, so as a complying development, basically a council has 10 days to knock that proposal back. If it is not knocked back within 10 days, it's considered approved. So that kind of really speeds up those real tick and flick kind of developments. You then have a mid-level development scheme that they're looking to put into place, which is they plan to basically introduce a targeted assessment pathway for any kind of non-complying middle-level development. So let's say you're building a 3-story house, or you're doing kind of a renovation that is not within those constraints on your street. They're basically going to have this targeted assessment pathway where a strategic planning and community consultation have already taken place, and they're essentially preventing you from having to go through a full DA approval. So there'll be certain specifications that they'll look at without going through those really long-winded, 6 to 12 month DA approvals. And then finally, for major developments, now at the moment, if you're doing a major development, you've got to go through 22 different state agencies. You've got to go through the water board and the fire board and this and that. Now they've built this, it's called Development Coordination Agency, and they will liaise with all the different bodies. So these guys, essentially, you'll have a one door to knock on if you're a developer, and then they liaise with everybody else, which just kind of removes a lot of that hassle of waiting for these different departments to kind of get back to you. So they're kind of the major changes that they're looking to see. Some questions for you, Louis. Do you think these reforms will lead to more homes being built?
Keeping everything else equal, yes, they will, Sam. So I'm in favour for most of these reform changes, and it will make it easier to complete a new development or for owners to do a renovation. There's no question about that. This is definitely going to help on the supply side, notwithstanding the fact that the supply side's influenced by other factors as well, beyond delays with local council. For example, getting finance on the supply side has become a trickier or difficult effort in recent years. So that's been a contributing factor behind less supply. It's not all about council reform. No question this is part of it, but it's only just one part of why we've had supply constraint issues.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a thought that it may just lead to faster paperwork, but I sort of believe, paperwork was part of the slowdown process, so having one part of that process speed up means that developers can work on more sites at the same time and probably have to invest less time into admin.
Oh, no question. And so that means, more resourcing towards doing the build itself, which is a positive. I'm in general favour of this, notwithstanding the fact that one of the other issues surrounding the supply side and the demand side has been the quality of the build. In a number of recent examples, especially across Sydney, there have been woeful builds being done, which has strongly impacted upon the wealth of those investors who've gone into those builds. And so while we want to have what I've always called a carrot and a stick approach towards developers, and this is definitely going to be more of a carrot approach and make their lives easier, the stick still needs to be there in terms of ensuring that the quality of the build, particularly high density dwellings, is still top notch.
And sort of my perspective on this, and I'd love your take, is by only having one department that the developer needs to go through, in a way they can, I would say, have more of that stick approach too, because you've got a consolidated body that's looking at the project as a whole, rather than in these individual bodies that are just managing their own piece of the pie.
No question. So having a situation where you've got one body just looking into projects is going to be helpful. They've obviously got to do a great job. What's important out there is that we have independent people visit the sites to ensure that what the builder says they're going to do on paper is what is actually occurring on site. That's critical.
Absolutely, absolutely. And who do you think benefits the most from this? I mean, obviously developers benefit, but would you say home buyers benefit as well? Home buyers and government benefit too?
Well, home buyers will eventually benefit from a greater supply surge in the marketplace, which put a cap on prices, increase more choice for buyers, more supply overall. Developers, no question, they're going to benefit from this, which is good. Those who lose out, councils losing out, they've
Absolutely.
got less power in the process, which maybe not necessarily is a bad thing.
Yeah.
They keep in mind that there'll be carve-outs, for example, heritage listed sites and so forth, which council will still have a fair degree of control of. Existing property owners, well, we need to see more detail on that. Will it be possible for someone to put up a high-rise development right next to you, to your home? Well, it's going to depend on the zoning of that area to see whether that's allowable or not. But there may well be instances where there's going to be property owners getting some nasty surprises.
And and I was also going to mention, you've also got a lot of residents that I do think do push for community consultation, and I think they possibly could lose out in a lot of these situations as well if the state levels are controlling.
Yeah, there will be probably less community consultation occurring. Developers would be wise to keep that consultation up. But yeah, I would imagine there'll be less consultation.
Do you foresee there being a house prices and affordability shift due to these changes as well?
In time, potentially, but once again, it's going to depend on what's going on the demand side. So let's just say that this has got the propensity to increase supply by, say, 20% year on year.
Yeah.
Just putting a number out there, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. If demand, though, is surging by more than the supply rate, we still have a housing affordability issue. And so this is why we always need to consider what's going on the demand side from a purely analytical point of view.
And I think you do have a lot of these policies that do sort of make sense, but my concern is kind of the timeline, because you've got the 5% policy that's going live in October.
Yep.
Now that's going to create an immediate shift. This policy, for instance, you've got this policy which probably is going to take a few years, I'd say, to take effect for us to really feel the impacts of it.
Yep.
And then you've also got the policy around free TAFE as well, which is again even a longer bow. So you've sort of got these policies that in the long term all could add up to better supply, but they're all kind of on different timelines.
They are all on different timelines. The other side of this we haven't spoken about is the infrastructure side to it, which I'm not sure of whether this is properly covering. But when you see a surge in supply, you need to have appropriate town planning and infrastructure in place. It's no good building thousands of homes in a single locality and not thinking about what is required for schools, hospitals and other amenities, given that the plan is to, say, increase a local area by 10,000 people.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, you could argue there's been some work around that, obviously, with North Connects and West Connects.
Major infrastructure size of metro, but we're talking about, planning for local schooling, local hospital systems, what's going on with the local public transport, such as bus services.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think the biggest risks are, other than just the infrastructure issues? What do you think some of the other biggest risks are in implementing these changes?
Look, I think it just goes back to the quality concern. We're going to see a surge in activity, development activity. We need to ensure that the quality of these builds is of the minimum standard the government requires. And that means not necessarily when there are new laws surrounding quality builds, we need enforcement of the existing laws. There's plenty of laws in place in New South Wales and other states to ensure a minimum quality threshold for builds. But what's been lacking has been the enforcement of those laws.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also would say, kind of on a bit of a different trajectory, you've got, this policy is obviously trying to address, to me, hand in hand with the first home buyers initiative and kind of the rental crisis as well. But again, my concern around the timelines of how much impact this has had, because we've still got a labour shortage, which is an issue. We've still got material shortages, which is an issue. You know, I know there's a lot of developers that are looking to source cheaper materials from China, but, you know, are they up to the quality and the standard that we would expect across the board as some of the Australian materials are, which are far more expensive? You know, are we sure about those? Is there going to be regulations around that? And obviously there's considerations around environmental impact as well, because I know they're taking those considerations in with this policy too. Do you know of any kind of other states that have kind of fast-tracked any of these kind of planning reforms before?
I haven't seen such reforms across other states like what we've seen here announced today in New South Wales. So it's fair to say that the New South Wales government are effectively pioneers in trying to reform the supply side approval stages.
Well, thank you so much for listening today, guys. Look, in summary, we've discussed some of the new important changes that are coming out from the government. We've looked at how these are going to affect buyers and renters, what we see the future looking like, and the issues around potential timelines with some of the other government initiatives that are going on at the moment. Please pay attention to what's going on in the news at the moment. We're seeing new policies and new stories come out about this every day. We also post a lot of our auction results and vacancy rates, which you can see how individual suburbs and individual locations and cities are impacted. So please keep an eye on us. We're also going to do more videos like this to keep you up to date with what's happening in the market.
Yeah, I think the next one's going to be either on population growth, the demand side, and I understand we're going to get a special guest, an ex-SQM employee who's now gone down the path of doing AI in a big way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So guys, please keep following us, please keep watching, and please visit our website for any updates. Thank you so much for listening.